formation. Notice the three-point stance of the backs for Mississippi State in the backfield.
When I first came to Jackson as a member of the legislature in the late 1940s, that area, that hill out there was just a sage-covered area of weeds, and it was not used for anything worthwhile. Somebody got the idea of building a football stadium.
As an athlete, you think about, I'm playing in Mississippi Memorial Stadium. That's the place to play in Mississippi.
The shrine of Mississippi football was right here in this stadium.
Coming from a small town, that was our Superdome.
You can tell a lot of Mississippi history through the prism of Memorial Stadium, there's no doubt about it.
Anybody that played in that stadium, whether white, black, we were gonna go there and watch.
It really took its toll on the university and on the state.
Archie goes for the goal line.
You guys just have such great memories in this place.
There's a lot of people feel that they should still be playing here.
You had to be there to witness what was going on.
Mississippi Veterans Memorial Stadium. It was the vet.
I find myself pondering the remarkable importance which the rituals of sports had for the people of Dixie.
The decade of the 1950s was a huge growth decade, not only for Mississippi, but for the country at large. The 1950s were where we used all the momentum built up out of World War II to create really the great economic system that we have. And included in that, of course, was the growth of Jackson, Mississippi. Right after the war, we looked around and we saw a lot of things that we didn't have, and including in those things was a good football stadium, an athletic stadium. And that's when the civic leadership and the business leadership of Jackson got together and decided to build this stadium out here, and that memorialized the contributions that those who had fought in World War II presented.
1949 was the first construction. 21,000 is what the original seating capacity was. First one were concrete bleachers. I mean, you actually sat on the concrete as opposed to sitting on an elevated bleacher in that first stadium.
When we got a stadium for intercollegiate sports, it was a big deal. Universities and colleges of Mississippi were beginning to emerge as forces in football in the South.
When I was growing up, and even when I was a young sports writer, Ole Miss was a perennial top 10 team. LSU and Ole Miss were playing every year with national championship implications. Those were the games that drew a full house. Ole Miss, in particular, during those glory years, would play only 2 or 3 games a year on campus. I think Vaught Hemingway, for most of Vaught's career, didn't see but 28,000. So if you had Alabama or Tennessee coming in for a big game, it didn't make any sense to play it in a 28,000 seat stadium. So they just basically came lock, stock, and barrel down to Jackson.
My first time there was in 1956 when I was a freshman at Ole Miss. The stadium was not easy access. Parking hadn't really developed. The field as it was originally constructed really wasn't suited for a college game. The field had sand all over it. The sand would get in your football pants and scratch your legs and burn your legs, and so it wasn't a great stadium.
It was obvious from the beginning that that stadium was not going to be adequate for the kind of sports events that we would like to have there. And it was not until several years later that the stadium was rebuilt.
In 1960 and 61 is when they raised the capacity, went to 40,000 people. Rather than tear out the old seating, they built the lower section of this stadium up above that.
After they changed the lights, did some improvements to the building and to the grounds, we had some really important college games there.
But those early games brought to Jackson a lot of notice, and some of the great Southeastern Conference games were played out here at Mississippi Memorial Stadium. And it was a huge economic factor for the state. People poured in here from all over the state fans, Southern fans, Ole Miss fans, playing here in this great new stadium. I think the presence of this stadium in Jackson made intercollegiate football so much more important from every standpoint and from a financial standpoint, simply because we finally had a place where we could have enough room for everybody to come and see those games.
Things have come a long way in Mississippi, but then again, nowhere else had so far to go.
My first real experience was my uncles would come home from the steel mills of Gary, Indiana, and every Thanksgiving we would load up in cars and come to watch Jackson State Alcorn here in the stadium, and it was a big deal, and they had big crowds, and everybody would come from all the little small towns around Jackson. It was like a cultural experience. I remember watching Walter Payton, Jackie Slater, and Robert Brazile play in this stadium. And then, you know, Alcorn with Coach Marino Cassim. You look out there, on both teams, you would see 5, 10, 15, 20 future NFL players, first round draft choices every single year. And that's what I remember, and I was like, wow, what a great brand of football.
Let's face it, all the guys that we see playing for Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, back before the mid-60s and then in Mississippi, 1970, they were all playing at Alcorn, Jackson State, Valley, Grambling. I mean, they were, in retrospect, vastly more talented than Ole Miss and Mississippi State in those years.
At the time, African Americans didn't have anywhere else to go. If you wanted to feel welcome, I guess, at home, you had to create your own. Jackson State, of course, started in Natchez, Jackson College, and eventually moved to Jackson and just kind of took roots and held from there.
I was born in South Mississippi. When I was playing, the SEC had not integrated. I wanted to go to Ole Miss. I mean, every Sunday morning we get the Ole Miss playbacks. You sit in front of the TV and watch the Ole Miss play, woohoo, mercy. And watch the Ole Miss playback and that fight song. I mean, that's the place to play in Mississippi. Did I resent the fact that I couldn't go to Ole Miss? No. If you're living in South Mississippi, that's just the way it was.
I mean, there were lots of people who were saying never. We're not ever going to integrate. We're not going to allow black people to go to white schools. We're not going to let black people drink out of water fountains. We're not going to let black people go into restaurants. They can go to their churches. We're going to go to our churches. I mean, it was just segregated. It took a long time for us to come to terms with the reality the United States Supreme Court had said separate but equal was no longer the rule.
If I could sum it up, I would say at the time it was like a ticking time bomb. It's like a powder keg.
Some of my worst memories of that period are around that football game on that Saturday night when Ole Miss played Kentucky out here at the stadium. Governor Barnett got up and worked the crowd up to a frenzy and literally called on the people that would join him in keeping Ole Miss from being integrated.
Mr. Chairman and my fellow Mississippians, I love Mississippi. I love her people. I'm a customer. I love and I respect our heritage.
Well, it's part of our history, whether you like it or not. They spread the Confederate flag over the whole 100 yards of the stadium.
Football games usually arouse our deepest feelings anyway, our emotions. We're there to beat the other team. And so it was all mixed up together that night. There were those encouraged by the governor's speech to rise up in defense of the University of Mississippi, as if keeping a black man out was a defense of the University of Mississippi. It was the next night on the campus at Ole Miss, that we had that infamous riot. But you know, the next week, after the military were forced to come to Ole Miss and quiet things down, Ole Miss was supposed to play Houston on campus. And there were those who said, well, that game should be canceled. To his eternal credit, Coach Vaught says, we're not going to cancel that game, we're going to play that game. And some wanted to go to Houston, didn't think we could have a game in Mississippi, and he said, no, we're going to play in Jackson. And Ole Miss played one of its finest games that night against the University of Houston here in Mississippi Memorial Stadium. And I think it helped to settle down the hysteria that had enveloped the state because of the riot at Ole Miss the week before. Now that didn't end all of the tension at Ole Miss, but the back of that resistance was broken. And I think this stadium out here helped to do that. We went from the juxtaposition of the stadium one week being the scene of massive resistance to any kind of integration, and the next week, 1 week later, it was the stadium where people came together to try to get over what had happened the weekend before.
Low, when you're feeling low, when you just don't know where to run to, you should know I'm never gonna let you down. I'm always gonna build you up.
For that closer than ever moment, iPhone XS on the C Spire network. Moments like this inspire everything we do. C Spire, customer inspired.
The ball is on the 50, down is 3rd and 10. He runs it down the sideline, yes, Archie takes it in. He plays for the Ole Miss Rebels. Archie Manning is his name. The best Stanford quarterback you ever played the game.
Probably one of the best nights I ever had in Memorial Stadium was the high school all-star game in 1967. And I was one of 8 quarterbacks that Ole Miss had signed that year. 5 out of the 8 were playing in that game. I got to go in, threw about 4 and ran 1. Got MVP in the game. The high school all-star game had a huge impact on my career. It kind of jump-started my college career. When we got up to Ole Miss, first day of freshman practice, they lined you up by your jersey. First teamers wore red. My guess is if it hadn't been for the All-Star game, I would have been about 7th or 8th on that list. But because I'd had that big game, I had a red jersey. And my goal was to never lose that red jersey, and I didn't.
Archie had several great games in Jackson.
We played 5 home games. I guess 3 of them were in Jackson, 2 were in Oxford. And the big ones were in Jackson.
Certainly the Tennessee game, the Mule game.
I think that's the most memorable game I played in college. We'd already knocked off 2 ranked teams, and we're playing good. So we catch them in Jackson. They're undefeated, ranked 3.
Manning hits him with a perfect pass, and Ole Miss has 6.
And we just ambushed them.
Manning sends a man off in motion to the right. Ole Miss for a touchdown. And Ole Miss has scored.
Yeah, I always told my kids, you live to play in big games. That was a big game.
My favorite moment of all was everybody's All-American moment that we had. And we were playing Georgia.
I very well remember that game. I threw an interception for a touchdown right off the bat. Then I got hurt, and they kept me in the dressing room a while.
We were trailing at the half. And then in the fourth quarter, we came out of our dressing room and slowly worked around the end zone, around our bench, and the fans went crazy.
Archie goes for the goal line, some 64 yards away. The Rebels have scored again.
Boom, boom, boom. We win the game, and Archie's the reason.
This is the biggest win at that point in my career that we had had. Huge win. The whole experience in going to Jacksonville was different than a home game. Bus it to the stadium and see that atmosphere, playing those SEC games.
1970 game between Alabama and Ole Miss. That game was really anticipated, and me and my buddies loaded up in a car, took a long trip from Bahia, Mississippi down to Jackson. Basically watched the Rebels blow out Alabama.
Mississippi Heisman Trophy candidate turns on the speed and the corner for his second touchdown of the game.
I mean, they couldn't stop Archie at all.
By the time we played them that night, we were better than they were. We whipped them.
Second time, and the result is the same as earlier, a touchdown. The issue is no longer in doubt. Ole Miss leads 41-17.
Again, great build up to another Jackson game. Total it up, I went 8-1 there, so that was a good field, good home field.
There's football, of course, but there's also the sense of a family reunion, a gathering of friends.
Jackson, Mississippi was frequently described by the sports writers as being the football capital of the South. Not only would we play one game, we would play two games. We would have double headers.
The double headers were really cool. You had people from all over Mississippi and a lot of times from surrounding states who descended upon Jackson. Every motel room would be booked, all the restaurants were filled. It was a great big party.
This was the place to be in the state of Mississippi. I guess you would say the utopia or the shrine of Mississippi football was right here in this stadium. And I can remember the SEC teams would play at 12 noon, and then the SWAC teams would play that night.
We always played the second game. The field would be immaculate with the exception of the end zone. They were able to spray paint Ole Miss or Mississippi State, and it would always be wet. You go in the end zone and you come out either maroon and white or blue and white. But the opportunity to play at that stadium was worth any minor inconvenience that we had at that time. And as an athlete, you didn't think about you were playing second. You think about, I'm playing in Mississippi Memorial Stadium.
Coming from a small town, that was our Superdome. We had a little small high school stadium, of course, and then when you came to Jackson, to a place that seats approximately 60,000, and the ambience of college football at the time, it was a big deal.
We would come in on the tail end of the Ole Miss game or Mississippi State game, and that was my really chance to see Mississippi State and Ole Miss and how humongous the crowds were then.
Football in Mississippi is what drives our communities. If you want to see people in Mississippi of all colors and nationalities come together, pull a football out. And that's what the vet did for us. Anybody that played in that stadium, whether white, black, Haitian, it didn't matter. If they played football, we were gonna go there and watch.
Well, looking at it now, considering how Mississippi was, I think it went a long way in race relations, I really do. Nobody thought about black, white. It was just everybody met at Memorial Stadium to watch football. Everybody just got in, got out, enjoyed the games on both sides. It showed us that we could get along for a day.
Hello world, it's nice to meet you. I had an epiphany one night, looking at the endless star-filled sky. The world is ours.
Moments like these inspire everything we do. C Spire, customer inspired.
I became inured to defeat. I have never since expected victory.
The best single football game I ever saw was State, Alabama in 1980. Packed house. You know, State hadn't beaten Alabama in 20-something years.
Well, obviously, this is the toughest challenge yet to face the Mississippi State Bulldogs. This Alabama team is number one in every respect. Well, you bet they are, Jack.
State had been pretty good, but Alabama was Alabama. They're arrogant and thought they were going to come in there and kick the State around and leave with a typical Alabama win, you know, play good defense, score when they needed to, and get out of town. State wasn't having any of that.
Crowd of better than 50,000 coming alive. With freshman John Bond, number 13, engineering at quarterback, options it to the right side. Found the going tough.
The intensity of that game, it was incredible. Between the 10s, we were pretty good. But boy, you get down any closer than that, it gets kind of tight. People start hitting.
That was the hardest hitting college football game to this day that I have ever seen. That were two defenses that would knock your jock up into your watch pocket.
35, they go to Ogilvie on the draw, but Johnny Cooks met him in the middle.
Defense was playing like they were playing, and we were moving the ball and controlling the ball. And they said, man, we got a shot at these guys. I think at halftime, the mood changed in the stadium.
The third period of play in a tied-up football game, the Bulldog offense on the move.
You could tell the intensity between the teams. Alabama, they started playing a little harder and hitting a little harder.
So now the Tide will make their big move to what they hope will be points enough to prevent Mississippi State from upsetting the Tide. The Tide stretching their victory string to 29. Crowd is alive. Jacobs wants to throw. Is looking. Fires left side. Pass completed at 18. Jacobs under pressure. Fires in the middle. Pass caught at the 5. Knocked down at the 4.
Alabama drove to about the 5-yard line late in the game.
1st and 4 and goal to go for Alabama. Jacobs says he cannot hear. Jacobs goes up underneath. Jacobs long snap count, goes to the fullback. Fumbles the ball. Bulldogs recover. Bulldogs recover. Bulldogs recover. With 6 seconds, the Bulldogs recover.
It was just about as exciting as a 6-3 game can possibly be.
3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Game's over. Alabama goes down in defeat to Mississippi State 6-3.
It's a great memory. It's a great memory. Not many people lined up against the Bear and beat him.
We loved a good storm coming. The wilder it blew, the better we liked it.
Welcome to the Mississippi Memorial Stadium in Jackson, where this afternoon Coach Emory Bellard of the Mississippi State Bulldogs are hosting the University of Mississippi Rebels, coached by Billy Brewer.
In 1983, it was Billy Brewer's first year, and we played Mississippi State. Mississippi State was pretty good that year. They had John Bond at quarterback.
Weather-wise, we do not have an ideal fall Mississippi day. In fact, it feels more like an April day relative to November. It is 75 degrees. The wind is extremely high, and it could play havoc.
Ole Miss was 5-5 coming into it and had to win it to go to a bowl game.
A driving kick upfield. Timmy Moffitt wants to handle it at the 35, runs laterally to the 40, breaks the tackles, comes out to midfield, keeps running with a screen of blockers in front of him. He's going to go for a touchdown. Timmy Moffitt all the way. John Bond up underneath, goes to the right side and driving Kuntz to the goal line and scores.
Ole Miss led, and then State came back, and State's driving for a field goal to win the game. But if you look south of the stadium to where it wasn't bowled in, it just had the bleachers down there, you could see the storm coming from the south.
It had been windy all day and it had been gusting. There was a lower profile building there in the open end of the end zone than what we have here now.
The tornado sirens were going off. The wind was blowing, I mean, it was crazy. I'd get in there, I'd huddle up, I'd try to call a play, and my running back's just sitting there going, "What's them horns blowing for? What's them horns blowing for?" So don't worry about them horns, let's just move the ball down the field.
Klein handles the ball and rolls back to throw, and may go to the outside on the run, throws upfield. Pass completed to Wilson, he takes it down the sidelines, and is finally downed along the 27-yard line in Rebel territory.
And then with no time left on the clock, Artie Cosby, who was a really good field goal kicker for Mississippi State, lined up for a 27-yarder.
Waiting for the snap. There it is. It is placed down. There's the kick.
He hit it perfect. I mean, he hit the kick perfect. And it got right up there.
It turns. It turns. It is no good. And that ball was held up by the wind, blew it completely to the left of the kicker.
It was going right through the middle.
And as God is my witness, some unknown force swatted it back. The ball went backwards.
One of those gusts blew, and it blew the ball straight up and then back.
I guess it was a microburst, just came down, whoop, and just pushed the ball right back to where we snapped it from. Never seen anything like it, probably never will again.
Blew it completely to the left of the kicker in the goal post. He was plenty high and plenty long. This is unbelievable.
Never to this day have I been able to explain it, and that's where the term Immaculate Deflection came from. People think that God knocked it down.
In one of the greatest games ever played in the long history of Ole Miss and Mississippi State.
On behalf of the Independence Bowl, sending you an invitation to play the Air Force Academy.
When you saw that field goal fluttering up in the air, what did you think?
Thank you, Lord. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus.
And it was just like somebody up there just batted it down, didn't want it to be.
And I knew I'd hit it straight, and I thought it'd be good. And you look up, and I saw it coming back.
It's like somebody standing over there saying, "No, you're not going through, because Mississippi State's not going to win this summer."
Low, when you're feeling low, when you just don't know where to run to. You should know I'm never gonna let you down. I'm always gonna build you up.
For that closer than ever moment, iPhone XS on the C Spire network. Moments like this inspire everything we do. C Spire, customer inspired.
I don't want realism. I want magic.
Inafina, Choctaw Indian words for home in the woods. Population a little over 2,900 people located in LaFleur County, Mississippi. The Delta Devils of Mississippi Valley State University, playing a wide open offense, lead the nation in passing and receptions and are outscoring their opponents by 40 points a game. With their no-huddle offense, they are undefeated this season, and two of their leaders are quarterback Willie Satellite Totten, who is averaging 55 passes a game, and receiver Jerry World Rice, who catches passes as easily as most of us catch coals.
We really felt at the time that we really was putting on a show, scoring the points that we were scoring. Jerry was having the year that he was having. Our first game, I think we scored 77 points. And Coach said, wow, well, let's continue to do it. We came back the next game, we scored 86 points. Even though Jerry Rice and Totten were pretty much the highlight reel, people were looking at Archie. He was going up and down the sidelines, and you saw that cowboy hat. You know, all he was saying was, throw it to Rice, throw it to him.
Cooley took a $3,500 recruiting budget and went to small high schools and tiny towns looking for the players that big college coaches ignored.
Valley was getting national press because of the number of points they were scoring and how bad they were beating opponents and how many catches Jerry Rice was making per game and how many passes Willie Totten was completing a game.
When we faced Alcorn, I think both teams was undefeated. Jerry was in his senior year, Isaac Hope was in his senior year. Both guys was getting attention from the NFL.
They were scheduled to play in Itabena, in a stadium that at that time set like 7,000 or 8,000 people.
Why would you waste that Alcorn Valley game with those two teams undefeated and what was going to be for a conference championship? Why would you play that on one of their campuses where the stadiums were so small and infrastructure wasn't set up for that?
I wrote a column that said it's a shame that that game is going to be played where only 7,000 people can see it. And I proposed that they play the game at Memorial Stadium, and they did it.
The Delta Devils play undefeated Alcorn State tomorrow. Interest in the game has been so high that they've moved it from Itabena to the 62,000-seat stadium at the state capitol in Jackson.
That was the talk of the town. You had to be at that game. Even if you didn't go to any one of those schools, everybody was there. Black people, white people, SEC fans, Jackson State fans, you just had to be at that game.
I was there. 62,000 people sitting in the aisles.
I do remember I actually attended it. We were actually sitting on the steps.
Packed. You could not move. But I was just so excited to watch Willie Totten and Jerry Rice play. I don't think I slept all week.
Everybody in the state of Mississippi, I think, was at that game. Everybody that I come in contact with, even now, say they was at the game. And I truly believe it too, because you had to be there to witness what was going on.
We are back at Mississippi Memorial Stadium. We're just moments away from kickoff. The satellite connection for Mississippi Valley truly out of this world. Masterminding the Braves defense is the Black Fox Marino Castle, and he has some pretty formidable tools in a hard-nosed defense led by Ike Holt, the all-time 1AA interception leader. Something has got to give. All right, here we go.
The biggest thing I remember was Jerry Rice trying to shake Ike Holt.
Totten back to throw. Totten looking, almost intercepted. Ike Holt had his hands on it, but could not hang on.
Ike Holt must have used every trick in the book. You could be sitting there from the stands and Jerry Rice be running across on patterns that he had a handful of jerseys. You could actually see it.
Totten back to throw. Flags are down. For Rice, incomplete. And man, did he make an effort to try to catch that one.
Jerry, for any other player, it would be considered an incredible game. For him, it was like he was held down to 10 catches and 2 touchdowns. He was held the entire game. Marino Chasm told me years later that he told Ike before the game, he said, they're not going to call holding on every play. Get a hold of him. And he did.
Totten passing to Rice, intercepted, and touchdown, Ike Holt.
I didn't understand how good Alcorn State was until we got into the game and it started to unfold. And it was obvious Alcorn State was not going to get blown out and they were going to stay in the game. And eventually won the game.
That's the ball game. Time runs out. Alcorn on the field. The celebration. A terrific game. An absolutely astounding game. I certainly hope Valley doesn't feel bad about it.
It wasn't a game that we left with our head hung down. It was a game that we said, hey man, we made history. And I think people didn't really worry about who won the game. They wanted to be a part of that game. That's over 30 years ago. I remember that game just like yesterday. It's just a remarkable game, man. And I think it's a game that people in the state of Mississippi will forever remember.
Hello world, it's nice to meet you. I had an epiphany one night, looking looking at the endless star-filled sky. The world is ours.
Moments like these inspire everything we do. C Spire, customer inspired.
Leaving reminds us what we can part with and what we can't, then offers us something new to dream about.
The other major construction was in 1980 when they did the bowl end to complete that bowl end. All the other big Southeastern Conference matchups back in the day had much larger venues than what we were sitting at, in a little over 40,000. It was a much needed expansion if we were going to try and keep the Southeastern Conference schools playing here.
Anybody who was around would tell you that Ole Miss lobbied hardest for the expansion of the stadium. Other schools in the SEC were using it against them in recruiting. They would never play in front of as many people in Mississippi as they would at LSU or Alabama.
There were people on their side that said that you have to do this in order to keep us. And then, of course, after doing that in 1980, we enjoyed about another 8 to 10 years with them playing multiple games in here.
They lobbied hard for it, and then they started taking their games back to campus.
That revenue that we were reaping as profit from $200,000 to $400,000 per ball game of net profit to the stadium could be put back in their pocket.
The schools, campuses, towns realized, hey, we have to start playing 6 or 7 home games here a year because of our students. Not all of our students want to travel back to Jackson. When Ole Miss went from 2 to 3 home games a year to 6 home games and eventually 7 home games a year. And that's when Oxford exploded in the mid-90s. It didn't before then. It took home games. And then, of course, Mississippi State, same thing. They started hosting home games. The student enrollment started to boom, and you could sell your university to parents and kids on game day. And now look at it today, it's huge. It's worth $100 million to each university between Labor Day and Thanksgiving weekend. That's unbelievable.
You know, it's all about the money and chasing the dollar. It was much more profitable for them to keep it on campus, plus they got the campus looked at. It's hard to blame State and Ole Miss for that.
College football was meant to be played on college camps, and that's coming from a guy who wishes we still had big games in Jackson.
You enjoyed the Southeastern Conference teams still playing here up through the early 90s. Anytime up through then, everything seemed to be sufficient, everything was running good. When they left, and that money left, then, you know, all of a sudden you're on a budget, on a big budget.
When those 2 schools left to start playing on their own campus, the upkeep of it went with that. And at one point, the stadium was really, really a bad place to hold a football game.
Let's be real honest about this. Once State and Ole Miss pulled out of that stadium, they weren't going to put any dollars into that stadium.
They eventually sold it to Jackson State for $1. And now it's the stadium is a home of the Jackson State Tigers. It is a nice stadium, and Jackson State has made the best of it. They really have.
You know, you miss out on a lot of good things because that stadium is not being used properly. And Jackson still feels it. When you miss those games, and you're talking about millions of dollars that are being sucked out of the city.
That was the leading entertainment piece in Jackson for 15, 20 years, was all those neutral site / home games with Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Southern Miss, and when the SWAC was rolling.
I think it holds for Jackson State to get a stadium on their own campus or in close proximity to it, and that eventually it's going to be a medical corridor like the governor wants it to be.
With the way UMC's growing, I don't know what its future looks like. I'm not convinced football will be played there in 5, 10, 15 years.
so many fond memories of the vet, but I'm past the point of thinking that's ever going to be a fact of life. Well, I don't think we're ever getting back to that happening. I just don't see it.
Eventually it's not going to be around, and I want people to really get a chance to go back into that stadium before they close it and before they tear it down, to really get an opportunity to get that feeling again. I would love for Ole Miss and Mississippi State to play one more game in that stadium before they close it. It probably won't happen, but just to see them play in that stadium and to know that it'll be a sold-out crowd in that stadium one more time.
All good things that come to pass, maybe it's outlived itself.
The old girl's probably ready to put to bed. But at the same time, I'll never forget some of my experiences there, and I hope that other people in the state that enjoyed it as much as I did will always remember the old girl as a pretty good venue.
It would be there tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, not only to hope, not even to wait, just to endure.
To me, Mississippi Memorial Stadium was somewhere that we could take people from anywhere and be proud of. Our stadium is as good as anybody in the nation. It just didn't get any better. It's special, and will always be special to me as an athlete, as a Jacksonian, and as a Mississippian. It superseded or ascended the racial issues that we had, the differences between the conferences that we had, differences between North Mississippi and South Mississippi.
You can tell a lot of Mississippi history through the prism of Memorial Stadium, there's no doubt about it. You can see from the stadium, watching games through the years there, you can see what has happened in Mississippi.
Mississippi Memorial Stadium has written a chapter all by itself in terms of bringing the state together, bringing people together in those stands out there. So the stadium, it stands not only as a memorial to the veterans of World War II and the other wars that we fought, it remains and has emerged as a reminder of the victory that we have won in terms of coming together as a people when eliminating segregation. So this stadium is a memorial to the unity of the people of the state of Mississippi. We can never forget that, and this stadium played a major role in it.
Jackson, Mississippi was one of the biggest college football towns in the country. I think that's why this town is as passionate as it is today, is because of that run and everything that happened at the Vet and Memorial Stadium.
I'll always have wonderful memories about Memorial Stadium and glad I had the opportunity to play there.
It's a big part of Mississippi football, high school football, college football. There's been a lot of history made right here.
When I think of the guys that have played on that field, you're talking Heisman Trophy winners, NFL stars, Hall of Famers. That's the legacy of Mississippi Veterans Memorial Stadium.
When it's gone, it'll be a memory. And only the people who remember those guys playing down there will be here to tell the younger generation that it used to be a stadium here and these people played on it.
You could literally look out at night and see the bright lights, and you can hear when it was a touchdown, and you can hear the band, and it made you want to be there. It was electric at that time. That's where you want to be on Saturdays. You know, we're going to the stadium, Mississippi Veterans Memorial Stadium. It was the Vet.